Thanks very much, Graham. I'll say a few opening comments and then we can throw some questions across to the panel. So I've thoroughly enjoyed this afternoon. There's been some terrific high-quality presentations. A lot of the bits resonated very strongly with me, and I know certainly with my colleagues. I mean, we were able, I think, to articulate many of the shared challenges, some of the strategies that are starting to be put in place to address those challenges. I was particularly impressed with the training presentation. I think I'm too big to be a microphone, though. That's which I thought were really good. And from the people that I've talked to, there's clearly a rewarding career path, and that came through, I think, Elisa, in your presentation. But clearly, amongst the people that are working within these core capabilities, there are a number of frustrations. I picked up on your list, which resonated with me. It's about culture in some organisations. It's about full engagement with people and being part of that community. It's feeling valued for what you contribute, and then clearly developing career pathways. One of the things that we've put in place at Monash, and it's something I struggle with, I don't think that our core capabilities should be regarded as service providers. I really think they should be regarded as partners, and I think that helps with that culture so that you're part of addressing the common problem, the common challenges that we're facing. Just to put a perspective from Australia, and Saba, I think, hinted at that with her presentation. We have two streams in our institutions or in our universities. One is a professional grade, and the other is an academic grade. And the prime difference between the two is that the academic grade is largely performance-based. So your promotion and career development is based on grants, it's based on high-quality publications, HDR completions, all the classic academic criteria which you judge. Whereas with the professional staff, they are, PD based. It's your job description which actually determines what you're doing. So it's very difficult to look at promotion for people that are on a PD-based grading. With the academics, at Monash we've gone down the practice professional pathway, so that as well as the classic criteria you use for getting up the academic ladder, we're trying to include new criteria, which is publications in specialist journals, it's presentations at specialist meetings, it's your standing within that specialist community so that you can be regarded as an expert or a practice professional within the work you're doing. And that is relatively easy to manage, and you can recognize and reward people in that stream. Where it becomes a challenge, and Saba, you showed that in your graph, and I think it was more Microscopy Australia rather than NIF, there's about a 50-50 spread between those that are on the professional grade and those that are on the academic grade. So how do we actually recognize and reward those, particularly on the grade that's professional? A number of those people would aspire to be leaders of core capabilities and would aspire to progress, but if they're buttonholed into a grade where they cannot actually progress that, then it becomes very challenging. So I think that the challenges are twofold. One is how do we recognize and reward people that are on the academic scale, and I think that can be addressed to a degree with the practice professor type system. But some of those that are more on, and I think it would be in the technical grade or operational grade, how do we actually recognize and reward them? Because classically, they would be recognized and rewarded for the number of staff that you oversee, the size of your budget, and some of those other responsibilities which don't really apply, I think, into core capability. So that would be my sort of observation on the presentations today. Some of the uniquely perhaps Australian constraints that we have, but I think talking to colleagues, it's a global challenge that people face. So I'll throw it open to the audience. I might start off with, well, throw it open to the panel first. Elisa, during your consultations, and you showed the graph there, that people are getting longer contracts, but still having that balance between, the professional staff or operational staff and the academic staff. Was that a challenge for those that are more on the operational side of things for career development, or was it seen as a challenge for both in terms of moving up the scales?
I would say that at least in Germany it's still a challenge for both groups. And maybe the expectations in the technical, on the side of the technical personnel are lower somehow because of this particular German system where the technicians decide very early. In fact, little kids decide at the age of 10 years in Germany, whether they are going to a higher education or to a very professional-oriented education. So these people, they don't really expect to achieve degrees or to be promoted at a higher level. So if they are coming from a technical background, I would say that maybe, I'm speaking for Germany, the problems are more on the academic stuff, because they, in the service positions, they are, yeah, as you said, they lack this appreciation, and it's difficult for the administration to really consider them as academics. So I really, in fact, had the problem that the person, my deputy in the facility, who is a postdoc, I had a discussion with the administration, because they couldn't see a possibility to remunerate and consider him as an academic person. He was considered an administrative. He was assigned to the administrative personnel. So these are and there the frustration and difficulties are then, of course, larger than in the technical staff, which doesn't expect it from the beginning.
So I wonder if we can move on. Jennifer, I really liked your presentation, and I just wondered if some of your colleagues around Boston, perhaps, have looked at the other core capabilities and looking, could we adapt this for proteomics? Could we adapt this for genomics? Are there other, can that program be expanded in terms of the training for core facility leadership?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are already cores at Harvard who are doing that. I think as long as the core facility has the sort of support that I've had, and that the core director really can offer the opportunities, that there's no reason why that can't be the case.
And Phil, before we open it up, I just wondered whether you talk a little bit about, you touched on the practice professor scheme, whether you wanted to just expand a little bit on that.
Happy to. Also, I want to make a statement regarding these two academic and professional tracks. I think we can accommodate both. I think we want to accommodate both. I think we want to be as flexible as possible and be opportunistic with the talent, as you've been with yours. When they come through the door and you see somebody who's really the kind of person that you think could do this well, I want the flexibility to be able to offer either an academic-like position or, and I wouldn't call it professional, they're all professionals because they're all paid, but a more staff-oriented, but a staff with a high-level functioning staff. So I just want to put it out there that I don't think there's one size fits all. I think we want to be as flexible as possible at every institution to be opportunistic and be selective in what we're looking for. The title, Professor of Practice, when the Provost Office came back with it, they came back with it because the two schools on the Evanston campus, engineering and arts and sciences, were uncomfortable, as I said, with using straight assistant professor. The medical school has no problem with that. They're dealing with professional students. The difference, as I was told, is the parents. The parents need to understand on the other campus that these are real professors. Well, my sense is, I've started using, as I go around talking to provosts and VPRs, that the value proposition is different. That tenure track faculty, who I've become fond of calling theoretical, need tenure. They need tenure for the following reason. The bargain that we make when a professor, myself included, comes is that we're going to spend the next 10, 20 years of our life working on something fairly esoteric, taking ourselves out of the job market. There's very few people who are going to hire somebody who's then been promoted to associate professor and maybe full professor in that particular area. The job you get as a tenure track faculty member has been scrutinized to fit into a very narrow need on the part of the university. Usually for a program, you're part of a programmatic build and you need that expertise. But you are giving up your flexibility to become a tenure track faculty. I made that choice, not knowing I was making that choice. Later, second thought that choice. In your field, in the core facilities, that's not the case. You have flexibility. If you want to move to another part of the world, they'll hire you if you're good at what you do. So it's a different value proposition for the institution in a core facility. So my sense is we're bickering over title simply because each institution has a sense of what it is. But at the end of the day, I want the flexibility to hire a faculty level person in these roles.
Jean, I have the privilege, as you know, of looking at the French infrastructure. And what struck me was that it's hosted both by universities, but also in publicly funded research organizations. I just wanted your perspective on whether the publicly funded research organizations can better accommodate career pathways for these people working in these facilities.
Okay, so actually we have a mixed model.
Yeah.
So somehow we have this kind of permanent position, and we have this title which is named Research Engineers for Core Facility. So it's, I would say it's quite good in some aspects. And more this is really dedicated to core facilities. So it was before just research engineers, but it goes from not only for biological core facility, it's also as well for physics and things like that. So there is a kind of national organization for this career path, and as you said, I mean, the main point is about what's happening at the university or in special institutions, where the definition of the career path is less evident. I have to say that there are some drawbacks about the career path that exist at the level of the national organization, where you have concourse, you have evaluation and things like that. There is a drawback is that actually the people can be engaged at one position. For example, you have a nice core facility in Paris, and then after 2 years they can go away, which is nice for them, because they can work in another place where this organization is installed as well. But of course, I mean, it makes people changing quite often. So that's one point. At the university level, there are more and more this conscious, I would say, to say that this is a specific job, okay? And well, I would say that we don't see the evaluation in the next step going away from having really, vocational training that will be really part of it. That's what Caroline was trying to say, I mean, to explain. So we really look for very special modules that will be validated, but the validation is something which is quite complicated, of course, because we have many institutions. In France, it goes through the ministries, research and education, and also the Ministry for Labor. So it's a bit special. There's law behind that. So I think, but at the university now they are starting to think about having this kind of thing, and they are engaging people not permanent position, but long-term contract, which was not the same kind of thing.
So I'd like to throw it over to the audience who've got any questions or comments they want to make around this whole aspect of career advancement and career development.
From a practical standpoint, there's 2 microphones on either side that you want to use, or thank you, whoever that was. You can ask questions anonymously or not on screen. Ian, they'll just appear.
Okay.
You can moderate that as you need.
Yeah, I can make a comment. I mean, I guess my comment is, so I'm from another Australian institution, a university, and I actually took a completely different approach to this. And what I said to the university was, the core staff are not academics. I just said, can I just use the academic track, which is an enterprise bargaining mechanism? It's a mechanism for HR really to handle the different types of the workforce. But I said I want to take some of my staff who are being captured as a job, but they're now developed and demonstrated some key metrics that say they are building their national reputation in their field, so they're part of a community of practice, they're middle authorship, they do publishing. So they're achieving some metrics that are valuable as a research infrastructure specialist. So I just created another stream, and I called them research infrastructure specialists. And I just put them on the academic track, and essentially I have 12 of them now out of 65 staff. And those 12 staff will just get promoted to that track based on bespoke metrics that fit their own area of research. Remembering that in my case, I have everybody from bioimaging or microscopy specialists to bioprocess engineers. So I have a very broad breadth of research infrastructure staff. And that's the way I've taken that. So far I have the support of the university, but it is testing the system though. It's not perfect, but yeah.
Yes, I'm not sure what institute you come from. I'm Spencer Short, I come from Pasteur Institute in Paris. You know what I'm going to say. That's absolutely true that there's this notion of advancing through, a simple definition of a HR matrix, right? But then on the other side, and the problem we have in France is very much evaluation is an important part of that. And so the definition of the academic track is actually the ability to pass through the scientific evaluation. And it's at that stage that what Elisa mentioned becomes critically important, which is that as you go up through the matrix that you present, the requirement for a research activity becomes a criteria for advancement through the track. So if your technicity is not considered as a scientific research pursuit, then you're not going to go through the track. So actually at a national level in France, and in some other countries I'm aware of, the real problem is not so much how to augment people's salaries per se, but how to actually deal with the evaluation problem. The Scientific Council in my particular institute absolutely shut down. They put an absolute concrete block in front of you if you do not have a research activity.
Yeah, but academic and research they're not, we're going into definitions now, but these people are obviously researchers, they're part of the research enterprise, because they're core facility staff, but academic is how academics are defined is different in different jurisdictions, right?
So look, I'd like to add to that, and actually to build on, I think, Graham, your comment there, 50-50 model. I had a young guy just came to me, he'd done 2 postdocs, had a good research pedigree, and he just said to me, he said, Ian, I don't see myself as a card-carrying research fellow that's going to drive a research team, but I'd really like to be involved in driving one of the core capabilities. So I said to him, look, and he was a proteomics person, those at Monash would know who I'm talking about, you can run the proteomics facility, but I'm going to divide your job into 3 parts. A third of it will be doing research, but that research will be driving the field, developing new technologies, new workflows, new reagents, and modifying the instruments. A third of your research will be collaborative research, because you're running a sophisticated facility, you can help in experimental design, data interpretation, and you'll get your name on middle of authored of fairly high impact papers, but you'll be publishing first author papers or last author papers in the field. And a third of your time is you've got to oversee this core capability, make sure your reporting is run properly and oversee the staff there. When I did his performance review after a year, you would not have found a happier person. He found his true niche. I think there's a lot of people like that out there. But my challenge is that how do I make sure that dedication, that hard work, is going to be adequately rewarded as he moves forward. I agree, you've got to have a research component one way or the other. You've got to be in touch with that research community. But how you actually manage that can be a challenge.
I think it's one of the common issues that we come across in a lot of these contexts. It's really about changing a culture or taking on a culture, and those cultures can be so crazily entrenched. In the case of and one of the problems with evaluation systems, for example, is that they're generally in the hands of people who have risen to the top through those evaluation systems. There's huge vested interest in actually just keeping them going. Well, these evaluation systems were designed 30, 40 years ago. And the people that started in their 20s and 30s, 30, 40 years ago, are now in their 60s, 70s, whatever, and they're in charge of these things. They have absolutely no incentive, and quite the opposite, to go around changing these things. And for whatever, the amount of resistance there is enormous. Another issue that's prevalent in a lot of Latin American countries is a lot of researchers are actually civil servants. They're actually government employees, effectively. And so a lot of these evaluation systems have equivalencies across disciplines. So in order to chip away and start saying, well, we're going to make this flexible for university researchers, you end up having to, well, that means we're going to have to change it for the soldiers, or we're going to have to change it for the health workers, because there are these equivalencies at levels, and it just becomes, you always think it changes to the constitution, to actually do this kind of thing. And once you get into that sort of political, sort of cultural sort of miasma, you just realise what you're up against. But you have to be really persistent. You can still chip away. So, for instance, actually a few years ago, I don't want to play any tiny violins here, but I actually lost about a third of my salary for this reason, because I wasn't regarded as being productive enough in research. And this created a problem, and the government wanted to expand these national laboratories, and we started saying, well, you're going to have real problems. How are you going to recruit quality people if they're staring, salary decreases in the face? And actually within the evaluation systems now, they've actually decided that, whereas before it was just 100% emphasis on first author papers or last author papers, they've now decided that 6 co-authorships is now the equivalent of a first author paper or a corresponding paper. Now that's a small step, but for the first time in 4 years, I've actually been able to reapply for that salary increment. And I didn't even bother applying previously, because I knew it was going to happen. And so, it doesn't have to be huge, monumental changes to the constitution. Just little kind of things can actually make a big difference. And so, chipping away, keeping that pressure, keep the channels of communication open, make sure that the powers that be are actually aware of these issues that are occurring. And it's all going to be different in different local areas, but it can be.
I'm glad, and because the question I was going to ask either to you or Jan is, ENBL, focuses on scientific excellence par excellence and publishes the best journals, yet the core capability people are highly valued members of the team. So how do you either of you build that culture?
We are, a little bit like France, we're in a little bit of a special situation. EMBL does have the research excellence mission, but we also do have the scientific service and infrastructure mission. So from the very beginning, the organization valued service staff as a core part of its core activity. So it's not attached to the research as a secondary enabling level, but it's actually a pillar that's at the same level of importance as the research itself. And so I think that makes for EMBL a big difference. So our service team leaders have from the beginning been at the same level as research group leaders at faculty, also the directors of course. And so therefore there was never this double hierarchy issue in EMBL. So that's a very clear definition. I think we're also special because all our staff is on fixed term contracts, because we have a training mission for Europe, and so we don't have to deal with longer than 9-year career perspective, which makes it very special. So I think for most of the national systems, the EMBL model cannot easily be applied one-to-one. But I think what maybe is relevant from our experience is that indeed for many of the service team leaders, it is an option for them to either be purely service, and then they also are only evaluated according to service criteria, which is not independent publication, where acknowledgement is sufficient for your performance evaluation, or to choose to have a mixed service and research portfolio. And then there is also a research component in the evaluation. And so I think you maybe have to give people these options, because some people want their own research and technology development and others don't, and just do this in collaboration. So I think that's a very individual thing, and I don't think one can decide one way or another from the beginning. So I think maybe what generally one can learn is, on the one hand, to get the universities and the research organizations to acknowledge that today scientific services are a core mission of these organizations. They just have to have it. You can't do modern research without scientific services, so this has got to exist. Like HR and like finance, you've got to have scientific services. So you need to deal with these people, you need to give them a proper home and career. And then I think for us to try to define what are the right criteria to measure the success, and what are the different models for the different levels of hierarchy in service staff for the evaluation. I think that as an international recommendation these two pillars. You have to have scientific services. That's a core function of any research entity. And here are possibilities for how to evaluate them and for how to structure their jobs, I think would be super useful for many of the national systems.
I just make a comment on that. This is for sure the way to go, but with the HR departments, they need categories, and they have research and they have administration, and there is nothing in between. So, and to achieve that, you have to indeed change the constitution.
Yeah.
So, of course, you can do recommendation, but in the end, when you knock at the office of the administrative office, then they want to make kind of check on the box, and there is nothing for this. I mean, if you are the only service, it's really hard to argue why you should put into the research part, and for a 50-50 split, this is basically non-existing. So,
John.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry that since we have a working group in the Global BioImaging Career Plus, I'm not sure that we dedicated a special point about the evaluation and recommendation, even if it's only recommendation, but to be clear in terms of recommendation for the evaluation of this, I think it would be interesting at least to have a gathering of the.
So one of the things, John, that was interesting for me when I was evaluating all the French infrastructures, they were scored on their capacity to underpin world quality research. So that was one criteria. But also they were looking at the capabilities in terms of driving the field as well. So publishing in your specialist journals, developing new workflows. So we were told to also look at that as well as the capacity to deliver and support.
I would say
research.
yes, but it depends which kind of facilities,
Yeah.
of course. I mean, of course, for facilities like bioimaging facilities, to be able to have let's say a scheme for making the research and development going through most directly to the facility to serve. So that means then you have some research and development papers and publication, and that's clear. But it's a mixed model. So I don't think it's true for all of them. Just thinking about animal core facilities or things like that, it's a bit different. But of course, I mean, there is this tendency to evaluate both for sure.
I don't want to lose sight of the talent. So what has been successful for us and for other institutions that I consult with is the talent pipeline. The real value proposition is wanting to draw those graduate students and those postdocs that are extremely talented, who look at the possibility of a tenure track position is not what they're interested in, and we don't want to lose them. So what we're trying to do is build a flexible enough system to pull them in because we need them, we want them. They are as talented at the top end, they're as talented as any assistant professor coming in a tenure track job. We want them. So we want a system to be as flexible as possible to draw them in. And your fellows program is a very good example. We don't want to have one size fit all and to think of it as simply government service positions.
So I would like to make two comments. My first one is to answer one of the questions. Opportunities for core facility staff are clearly evolving quite quickly. Now I skip a little bit. Is there a trip advisor for core facility staff? I'm not sure if this might link to shadowing program and exchange program. So the Global BioImaging website does have an overview of places where people can go. There's also a description what these host sites can offer to the staff. So I would like to invite the core facility staff that is here and also to spread the word to your colleagues to visit the Global BioImaging website to have a look there. And well, that's already another question, right?
Sorry, that's the
So what I'm not sure we should do is a TripAdvisor evaluates those sites. We are not there yet, and I'm also not sure if that is really advisable because people would like to learn a certain technique or they would like to learn a certain methodology, and one site can offer this, another might not be able to do so. So I would not start giving stars to the hosting sites, but rather try to contact and speak to them and see if a certain place suits your what you want to learn. The other comment I would like to make very quickly is regarding the development of an international recommendation, I think we have to go very strategic and long-term thinking, but at the same time, also to give the younger person some perspective, we should include some success stories, some low-hanging fruits. For example, I really liked your comment, Chris, where you say that the way how, or that 5 mid-author publications are now sufficient to cover for one. That could be a story we could try to share with colleagues so that they could try to get that change into the system. Because as Elisa has also shown, over the years there is a change. So we might not see a revolution until the end of this year, but if we just try to keep us telling those small success stories, they might add up. And probably this also echoes the flexibility we have to be open for from both sides. But at the same time, if you tell the young people, you have to be flexible, you're also pretty insecure. And I think you need some kind of guideline at the same time while being flexible.
Continuing on this topic of culture, which Chris raised, I like the figure that Elisa had with the core facilities sort of disappearing in the university structure so that they are not anywhere. And I think that is part of the problem, not in research institutions like EMBL, or you have a number of them around the world that are dedicated research institutions. But then if you have a traditional university structure, then between colleges or faculties or whatever you want to call them, the core facilities sort of disappear into the structure, and they're not recognized. And also in terms of funding, oftentimes they need to beg from the colleges or the faculties that please could we have some money, and they're not recognized as these kind of powerhouses of science that they should be. And then, of course, this will have ramifications for career development. So if the core facility is not recognized, then the personnel will not be recognized because they totally disappear, and then you need to change the constitution of the country and whatever. So you have problems.
Quick comment on that. I think this is something where an international recommendation could be really useful, because this is in the power of the universities indeed. So they could really decide where to place the core facilities in their organizational structure. So I think having them directly below the highest level management should be the way to go, and it's also realized in many places, but not everywhere. And yeah, so this would be
just an indicator of attractivity would be very important for university. With an indicator for effectiveness.
Okay, and then Jonathan after that. Oh no, ask your question.
Oh, okay. So Phil sort of touched on the funding issue, and I want to drill in a little bit further. And I think a lot of time, one way to change the institutional culture is to get the pressure from the funding agency to change it. When I was reviewing for the CCI, the Chan Zuckerberg initiative for the application scientist grants, and you can clearly see that in a lot of institutions, the cultures stay the same, even though the CCI is challenging that institution to basically say, when the time this grant expired, what would the career trajectory of that application or that applicant be? And a lot of this institution actually had the audacity to basically say, well, their salary will be reverted back to hourly fees. Obviously, those kind of things.
It was really great. They just said, yeah, we'll just finish this once
that pretty much, that's the spell to do of that applicant. And I think funding agency have to continuously pressure institution into thinking differently. And again, to echo what Phil has said, and also what you have said, Ian, is the core facility personnel and application scientists are an extremely important pillar. We are partner of research. More importantly, more so than a lot of the investigators, we are probably the strongest element in sustaining the expertise in that institution. if you lose that core facility personnel, you may actually have a sudden termination of that technology and the expertise until you hire somebody to fit into that culture of that institution and to rebuild that. It's actually take longer to rebuild. And I think the institution have to understand that, and more importantly, they have to understand it force-fed by funding agency.
Yeah, just two things. I also was reviewing that for the CSAT program, and you could see some of the universities said, yeah, sure, we'll buy into this for 5 years, but then we will revert because that's all we have. And so it was either cynical or practical, I mean, depending on your perspective. One thing I would say, just to, going back to the academic versus technical track. So we have had a couple cases where people have gone on the academic track, then been reviewed, and then actually demoted because they didn't meet the criteria. I think there's 2 universities in the United Kingdom that have now created a 3rd track. And so effectively the deans got together and drove and beat HR into submission. I mean, that's the way they describe it, those are their words, and created a 3rd track. But that was that's recognizing that all of the passion, the polemics are fine, but actually you need an administrative process ultimately, and that's what you need to do.
Thank you, John. Sorry about my voice. One thing that we keep coming up with here all the time is that people have to be publishing. And I just like to voice my opinion there that that's not only publications, and we can actually put in different KPIs for them. So, it is really strategic to keep these people there. We do lose so much. And the research is gone if we lose those people. So here we have these great technicians. Look at what we have in light microscopy in the last 10 years. How many new techniques have we got? And how good do you have to be just to be a super resolution person, and to be an in vivo microscopist? They're like, once you're going up that level. So, there's KPIs you can put in there that help those technicians as they go up. So you become a good confocal microscopist, you become a good super resolution person, you develop a method with somebody else, you keep that method, that person leaves, you then bring the next person in, and they are already at that level, and you're not wasting 2 years to get there. So there are ways of putting KPIs in for these people that you would be able to get them to be moving up the level. And I think the way to go back to the universities is the fact that you need to retain this high level of research to be giving your science papers, your nature papers. And the way you're doing it is with the staff. And you can show the staff doing it. They won't be getting their papers for the first couple of years, but they will actually be able to show that people are going to conferences and presenting it, and they're presenting it. So there's sort of little levels or increments that you could be putting in there that you would be able to evaluate properly.
Look, I think that's true, and I think I was saying to Phil before, we did a return on investment exercise across all of our platforms, and we interviewed the deans, the ADRs, and the high-flying researchers. What is the greatest benefit of running these core capabilities? And the one that came up first every time was our capacity to recruit people and our capacity to retain people. Those were the real criteria. So if you want to build research excellence, you've got to actually underpin it with these core capabilities. And to your point, that when people do leave, then you have to be able to bask in reflected glory because you've trained these people up and they've gone on to bigger and better things. But if you wanted to recruit people to replace them, then you've got to be able to offer a career structure and a mechanism of rewarding those people that come in. So it all goes hand in glove, I think. Other questions? I wonder, Jennifer, if I could ask you that question at the top there. Is it better to get trained on a specific technique to become an expert, or to be trained on multiple techniques? Because a lot of your coursework would be applicable to a variety of different techniques. I mean, it's a little bit of the question I asked before about the breadth of what you're doing.
I think the most important thing is that you learn something you're passionate about. But a more practical answer, it depends on the core. A big core facility that has a wide range of technologies depending on, if you're looking to manage or direct that sort of core, you do have to have expertise in all of them. But there's certainly more and more specialized positions. So there's core facilities that specialize in super resolution microscopy, for example, or in my core facility, Tally Lambert is our super resolution and light sheet expert. Yeah, so I think, if you go where your interests are, there are opportunities in both, or both.
Great.
I mean, I take an added view to this, and that is that, especially we have a distributed core, so core across 10 universities. And so a researcher will come to one of our facility fellows with a problem, but it may be that that particular location doesn't have a solution. It's important that that facility fellow knows about the other technologies and can say, well, go to Monash, they've got some extra kit, I'll help you get up and running there, and the other thing is that so much of our research now is multimodality, and so we need our core facility staff to be able to bring together different technologies.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a difference between having a deep understanding of a technology and having a broad sort of knowing what's out there. I mean, certainly I have people who come to me for a consultation and I tell them they should not be doing microscopy, they should be doing some other technique.
Other questions, thoughts? We are slowly running out of time. Here's your chance. I think there's going to be a working group tomorrow to start putting some recommendations together. Certainly, I think if we got something that was agreed internationally, it would be very useful for us all to take back to our host institutions and say, look, this is because it is a global problem, a global challenge, to try and get some recommendations where we can try and let some changes in place to recognise and reward these people. Chris?
Yeah, I think it's the most critical issue, really, that's facing with this whole area. I think it's absolutely vital to do that, to get these international guidelines. We'll work under different schemes. There's some places that hire and fire or just short-term contracts. Others are pretty much the opposite scale of the spectrum, where they're working on government contracts, which might be for life, whatever. But it's very important to get that sort of idealized sort of situation identified, such that by hook or by crook, or we can take that back, and within our own systems that we're all experienced within, we can at least try and use that for a bit of leverage somewhere. It doesn't have to be, like I say, a revolution. It can just be taking a little bit of that and a little bit of that, and just saying, look, can we do this here? Can we do this within the institution, or can we do this at a national level? And it's so important to get that idealised sort of this will be the best. If you can do this, this is fantastic. As an international guideline, and then for each of us to try and take it back to wherever we are, and to just try and adopt the elements that we're capable of adopting. That to me is why it's so important to go through this.
Okay, so before I ask Graham just to say a few closing comments, I'd like you to join me in thanking the panel for their discussion and their presentation, so thank you.